Hello and welcome. I am joined by Charles Nixon, founder of the Cambridge Marketing College. Charles, we're going to talk about shrinkflation today. And I know you have a view as to whether shrinkflation is good or bad. Can we start with what shrinkflation is?
Hello, Kiran. It's nice to be back. Shrinkflation has now been joined also by skimpflation, I see, by one journalist. So the answer to your question essentially is that a branded product tends to reduce its size but maintain its price. It's happened in many times during the past in periods of inflation, when instead of putting the prices up, branded product suppliers decide that they actually want to maintain the price, but need to accommodate an increase in costs. So they usually will reduce the content in size. Sometimes it's been noted that they actually may maintain the packaging size, so there's more space inside. And sometimes it is seen as being something that is not particularly honest with consumers, on the basis that the price is the same but the content has reduced. And skimpflation is the one that's coming out whereby the quality of the content is being reduced and substituted with inferior products or a smaller amount of whatever it is that you think you were necessarily buying before. Both of which have been brought about by organisations trying to maintain margins.
Yes, I mean, there's various examples that various journalists and companies have highlighted. So the Guardian Money did some investigations into skimpflation, and there was an Aldi olive oil spread which originally had 21% olive oil. Now, olive oil is massively expensive now, thanks to various global warming issues. And so Aldi reduced the amount of olive oil within the spread, so it's gone from 21% to 10%. But the price, so they could hold the price, but the quality of the products had gone down. But the reason it's called skimpflation is because it's not then highlighted, and I think that's one of the ethical things about skimpflation is that you think you're buying the same product and the same quality, but you're not.
That's very true. You are having to be more of your own police person, if you like, on the basis of looking at what it is you're buying and consuming, which, as a good consumer, you should be anyway.
Well, okay. And the other thing that brought shrinkflation into view was one of the French supermarkets, Carrefour, decided they were going to do a marketing campaign where they actually called out shrinkflation by sticking shrinkflation warnings on supermarket shelves, which was quite an interesting thing for them to have gone for.
It's a similar aspect, I think, when you consider the discussions that have been going on in the past between various branded manufacturers and retailers with strong retailing positions. I believe, if I remember rightly, Heinz and Tesco's had a bit of a to-do some time ago about the prices that Tesco's were prepared to accept. You can see the situation from Carrefour's perspective, and you can also see the point of view from the branded suppliers. One of the issues that I think it really highlights is that in times of inflation, and indeed a general sort of trend over the decades, has been a rise in own label from branded products. So Carrefour is quite a successful brand with its own reputation, and the result of which it wants to maintain its relationship with its customers. From that perspective, it obviously wants to maintain a high reputation for honesty as much as anything. But the other aspect, of course, is that they, by doing this, are highlighting the value for money, as they would see it, of their own products. And have been unable, I believe it was with Nestle, to come to an agreement as to managing the price increases. So they were basically pointing this out to the consumer, on the idea that, of course, that they will therefore be pointing this consumer to their own products, which has been a trend, and indeed is a trend which is causing inflation to gradually come down in the UK.
Well, yes, okay. We're talking on the day when food inflation they've announced has come down fraction of a percentage point. And for anybody who thinks that means that prices are actually going to go down, sorry, it just means that the rate of increase has slowed. It doesn't actually mean prices will necessarily fall. So, Charles, I think you take I think most people would argue that shrinkflation is possibly a bad thing, that it pulls the wool over consumers' eyes, perhaps. I noticed my favourite Cadbury's rolls mini rolls used to be sold in packs of 5 and now sold in packs of 4. And was therefore outraged because that's basically a 20% price increase hidden.
But no bad thing is what you want me to say, on the basis that I am a contrarian, and the result of which is that I think that there are positive sides to this. Yes, many of the products.
Hit me with those.
Many of the products of which shrinkflation is applied are arguably those which perhaps we should be moderating input of anyway. They tend to be those which are using high-cost ingredients, mainly from the point of view of sugars and oils. And a huge amount of activity is going on these days about the health of the nation, and the fact that the nation is still hooked on processed foods, and the result of which is causing a sort of demographic time bomb, as people are gradually not consuming the right things, and as a result will have health problems later on. So one aspect you could say is that shrinkflation is a market movement which is in the right direction. I don't think it's necessarily one of those where anyone has actually thought about it and promotes it on that basis, but I would see that on the basis that as we see many things changing in society for various reasons, many of them actually have positive benefits. So I think, as we see high inflation forcing people to eat less meat, there is the benefit from that point of view from the production of carbon gases.
Yes, I think the ethical side is, are you being honest with the consumer? Yeah, the fact that I can only buy 4 of my favourite Cadbury's mini rolls and therefore can't have one every day of the working week, but only 4 days of the working week, is probably not bad for my waistline. However, Cadbury's didn't point this out to me. I just suddenly, I picked it off the shelf and it was suddenly the same amount.
But on the basis that you've got to run a business, you aren't necessarily going to point out 5/now 4. You would just say there are 4. So I think you've got to be fairly pragmatic in the way in which you do this. And I don't think they're doing it on the basis of trying to make you healthy. No, they are doing it to maintain it.
And but surely that's your point. You're saying that actually there's a good side to this, but manufacturers are not being open and honest. They're not saying we're creating highly processed foods which are really, really bad for you, therefore we're going to sell you less of them for the same price.
No, and that's an interesting one in itself, because I think the last time I read an article which says that Nestle couldn't actually muster more than 50% of its products which were considered healthy by any category, the result of which is that vast majority of the stuff is unhealthy. And we do have to wean ourselves off this. And I think that there are significant arguments to be said from an ethical point of view that many of the products should come with health warnings.
Okay. But is that a reason to have shrinkflation, or is that actually an argument that we should be looking seriously at the type of food that is sold on the supermarket shelves?
I think it's a compromise, because I think that you can't wean a nation off processed foods overnight, but you can gradually reduce the consumption of them, and that is done, as everything is done in a liberal democracy, through price.
Okay, go on, explore that one further. So why price? Why specifically price?
Because that's the way in which we are stimulated. So if I put the price of meat up, people will eat less meat. It isn't done just for that, but it is an economic consequence of climate change. And so we are seeing a change in the way in which we consume, which is going to eventually lead to I think I'm hesitating on the word significant, because I think it probably will take a long time to be significant, but it will lead to changes in dietary patterns. It will lead to changes in the way in which we consume fossil fuels. The problem is when either governments get in the way to ameliorate this, or it may not happen quick enough. And so from an ethical perspective, you may wish to come down and on the stop oil side and say stop it straight away. The problem with that, of course, is that if you just stop it straight away, you would grind to a halt very quickly on various important and essential items. So you have to have this compromise, which, historically speaking, takes decades. Whether or not we have decades is the argument.
But you could also argue, and I'm not certain you're more of a historian than I am, that this is a social historian thing. I mean, I don't remember it being so easy to snack and find the level of food stuff that we can now. That's not a price issue, that's a product development issue and a distribution issue, surely.
Yes, I think that certainly is true, but what we find is that in order to be able to make that product development and distribution as successful as it is, it has to be at a price that the consumer can afford en masse. You can't do this if you're doing it for a niche marketplace. And so the result of which is that it has to be done en masse, and therefore price is a very important part of introducing any snacking product these days. And the idea of high level cost for a snacking product is gradually finding some sort of purchase in the marketplace on the basis that you appeal on the quality of the products that go into it, and the result of which is that therefore it contains some sort of healthy benefit, but it is clearly stated that some parts of it may be unhealthy. So what I'm arguing there, I suppose, is that we will constantly have changes in dietary patterns, but they will have to be stimulated by price, especially in today's world where we all concern ourselves with price because of inflation and the impact that's had on living standards.
Yes, so you'd be a very brave marketer at the moment to turn around and go, right, I'm putting all my prices up. It's unless, as you say, you're in a niche marketplace. If you're in a standard marketplace, you've got to be very aware that the consumers are counting the pennies.
Yes, very much so. The interesting aspect, I think, that we haven't really touched on, of course, and I haven't even got a terminology for it, is the degree to which companies have decided that now is the time to put their prices up, irrespective of the cost input side, because they haven't been able to put their prices up over the last 5 to 8 years, and the result of which is that there is a huge amount of capital investment that has gone by the board because margins haven't been high enough to bring about that investment. So we're now seeing an opportunity to generate larger profit margins and reinvest in particular aspects of production or R&D. So we may well see in the next 5 years a fairly large increase in innovation in these products. It may well be smaller products, but they may well be much more healthy through innovation.
You're right. That is a really interesting point and not one I had considered. But yes, there are some stealth price increases going on because you can.
There you are. You have to have a terminology.
Go, it's inflation.
Yeah.
Stealth price increases.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest problem I always find is being a contrarian. Everybody takes the negative approach to this. And I'd love to see some terminologies which were a positive spin. I have to have more income because I need R&D, and I need the R&D to bring out the next generation of products. Excuse me, I'm going to put my prices up.
Innovation price increase.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely. It's not snappy enough, unfortunately, to get in the Evening Standard, but you could try.
Yeah, I can't see a Daily Star headline on that one. No, okay.
Not unless it's got an alien in it.
But yes, you're right. You could, I mean, I'm calling it stealth increases, but you could definitely have a sort of more positive spin. Answers on a postcard, please, to Cambridge Marketing College. You can contact us on any social media post, but we'd love to hear some ideas of positive reasons for putting prices up.
Yes, indeed.
Charles Nixon, lovely to speak to you again.
As ever, Kiran. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.